Hello, welcome to Mrs. John's History. Today I'm going to talk you through some revision tips for history. So I've got a few different methods that I use and then some things to avoid. Okay, so the first one is record card essay planning. This is a technique that I used to use and that I highly recommend. The first thing I do is I write the exam question that I'm going to look at the top. I write the whole thing out every time. I'm then going to put my introduction. I'm not going to put all the different factors I'm going to say and exactly what I'm going to say in the introduction. I'm just going to say like the main point I want to make in my introduction. So I've said to be most significant must have the biggest impact on medicine and save the most lives. So my actual introduction might read something like, some people believe that the discovery of germ theory was the most significant breakthrough. This essay will consider 4 different factors. However, in order to be the most significant factor, it must have made the biggest improvement to medicine and saved the most lives in the long term. Okay. Then I'll note down what my for factors are and my against factors, and I'll write them as P1 and P2, which are the 2 separate paragraphs. So my 2 for paragraphs on Pasteur, here's what I could say. You'll notice that I've only noted down basic details and then written out in a bit more detail what my point is. So like how am I going to explain it? Why is it important? And then in the against side, again, brief details on why each thing is important in the development of medicine. And then in my conclusion, all that I'm doing is I'm saying which side I'm basically landing on. So I'm going to say that I'm mainly in favour of the question, and I'm going to say that although there were leaps and bounds without the knowledge that Pasteur developed, actually without his knowledge, then they would never have found cures for many diseases such as the one that Koch developed after Louis Pasteur. So that's basically what it looks like every time. It's got the question at the top and it's got this format. For the 16-mark question in the GCSE 9-1, you actually don't have to have an introduction, but if you want to kind of use this format so that you've got an idea of what the point of your essay is, then go ahead and use it in the A level. You do need to have an introduction every time, and it's a good habit to kind of get in your head what your introduction would be. Okay. The other thing that I do with these once I'm finished is I colour code them. So I would have dozens and dozens of these cards for all the different questions I could think of. You'll see that I've highlighted up here the date of this particular question, and I would then be able to organise them into time periods. And I might also highlight, say for example, germ theory, and I might do that in green, and then I might have all the questions that are on science as its focus in green. I might have everything that's about the church in red. I might have everything that is about education in purple. And so therefore I can switch the cards around and use them in different ways when I'm revising. That brings us on to our next method. So our next method is cause, event and consequence. Again, I use a record card for this. This particular one I'm going to do on the Enabling Act, March 23rd, 1933. So I always put the specific event at the top. And then I separate the card into 3 sections: cause, events and consequences. So for this one, I'm going to note down all the key things that I think caused the event. Again, you'll notice I'm not writing it in great detail. So for example, here, emergency decrees. This led to the banning of the Communist Party in the election. I know the detail behind it. I'm just noting down things that are going to remind me when I look at the card. And for example, here I've just mentioned the essay as powerful. Obviously, that doesn't tell me very much. It just reminds me that without the essay, they could never have passed the Enabling Act. And then for the event, I'm really specific to actual things that happened on the day of the event. So I'm not going into things that the Enabling Act was used for. That's going to be my consequence section. So I'd literally keep it to what happened on the day. I've obviously shortened Hitler to H here. That's a good technique to start shortening words you're using over and over again, like Reichstag fire could be RF. And then I say what the consequences were, so I say how it was used, and then this last bit effectively makes the Nazis unstoppable is the main thing. I could then, once I've got lots and lots of these cards, start to arrange them and bunch them into things that affect each other. This is particularly good for the Cold War unit that we do and the Elizabeth unit, so paper 2, because those papers are really focused on consequences, but is useful for absolutely any topic that you ever study in history, because it just gets you to think about, well, how does the story piece together? Okay, number 3 is read, cover, remember, check. This is a really, really simple idea. You use something like the cause, event, consequence card, you read it through, and then you cover your eyes, just like this cute otter. Or you turn the card over or cover it up, and then you try to remember while you're doing this. So for example, right now I might say the Enabling Act was passed in March 1933. I would then go back to the card and check if I was correct. If I was, I get to feel like this guy, really smug and like a hero. If I wasn't, I go back and I do it again until I do remember every detail on the card. This, I think, is the most important part of revision. If you're not doing this, in my opinion, you're not really revising. So it might be that you want to test yourself by getting someone else to ask you questions, or actually writing out questions for yourself to answer. That's absolutely fine. But this is a really simple way to very quickly be revising everything that you're doing. Okay, the fourth one is practice questions. Quite frankly, every time you finish a topic, you should answer a practice question, time yourself doing it to the exact time you will have in the exam, and then ideally email it to your teacher so that they can mark it. This might not be something that's possible for you for whatever reason, and the emailing part is perhaps really important, but not as important as actually practicing the question and timing yourself. Really good idea though to check yourself against a mark scheme or another piece of work that you've done, look at the feedback there and see how much you might have improved or anything that you need to change. Okay, so other things are videos and podcasts, and I just wanted to basically mention these briefly because lots and lots of people like to use these and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are using them, you must use watch or listen, pause, remember and check. So you watch the video, you pause it, and while you're pausing it, just like we said up here with read, cover, check, remember, you need to be covering your eyes or your ears and trying to remember it and then checking whether you got it right, and hopefully you will and you'll look like this little guy. Okay. So yeah, just to reiterate, if you're using videos, please watch, cover, remember, check. Okay. So things to avoid when you're revising. If you are note taking and you are not reading, covering, remembering and repeating, then you're basically just regurgitating information from the book that you're using or whatever source you're using. If you are not trying to remember it, you're not really revising. You have to turn it into something else in order for your brain to remember it. I have a lot of students that doubt me when I say this, but believe me, if you are testing yourself and you're trying to remember, then you're embedding it more deeply than if you just write and write and write and write. And I would also say just rereading as well isn't in the same category. It's the remembering bit that's the most important. Okay, don't give up. Giving up is something that is very tempting when you feel like it's not going very well and you can't remember and you're reading and you're covering and then you're still not remembering. But don't give up. It might take you a long time, but you just have to keep going. And sometimes you're actually remembering more than you think you are. I've put this one in brackets or air quotes, revising with friends. Nothing wrong with revising in a group if you are actually revising, but if you're actually just messing about, it's a waste of time. So just be really strict on yourself. Is it actually helping you? Getting too narrow too quickly is an interesting one. This is something that some people fall into the trap of, where they study maybe, say for example, I don't know, Weimar culture in extreme detail and then forget to think about the overview of the rise and fall of the Weimar government. So don't get too narrow too quickly. Make sure you know the overview, then start to zoom in and look at particular events and instances once you've got the whole picture. Or if you are going to go really narrow and do lots of key events, then please don't spend too long on one event. Just get that cause, event, consequence card done and then move on to the next event. Okay, and this last one is really just kind of a way to keep your spirits up. I think that a lot of students that study history really worry about the fact that they can't remember dates. The order of the events is more important. I am not saying you don't need to know dates. It is wonderful if you know the dates and extremely helpful. But it is just as important to know the order the events happened in. And if you can get that, the dates might come. So my advice is always to just think, actually, can I remember the order that things happened in? So using those cause, events, consequence cards is a really good way to be able to build up a timeline of those different events for a particular topic without necessarily having to fixate on, I can't remember the dates, I can't remember the dates. Okay, other ideas. I am going to put some links to these. So I've seen a really nice idea for trying to remember particular things using flashcards. Post-it note events. This is something that I have seen in another YouTube video, but also that one of our current year 12s uses and really likes. So basically you just write the event and the date on its own on a post-it, and you make that for every event you can think of in the topic, and you have maybe, I don't know, 60 post-it notes, and you use them to make a physical timeline on your wall, or you use them to group together when you're trying to think about what things caused this event, or what was the outcome of this, or if you're trying to find different themes. So if you're trying to find things that are to do with religion, then you can group the post-it notes together and move them around. But particularly to make a giant timeline, that's a really useful thing. Mind maps. I know that we've gone on and on about mind maps, but using mind maps and actually read, cover, remember, check with mind maps is a really good technique as well. And good old-fashioned timelines, just literally writing out the timeline and the order that events happened in. A variation on that I've heard of is actually writing out the story of something. It's quite time-consuming, but it might be quite a good way to learn for you. Another one might be telling the story. So literally just telling the narrative of what happened when Hitler rose to power to people that are willing to listen to you. Maybe even just record yourself. One last thing I'll mention about the post-it notes is if you are going to use that method, it's a really good idea to turn them over and try and remember exactly what they say. And then turn back over the ones you do remember, and then try again the next day with the ones you didn't remember until you do remember them all. Okay, personally, I keep it really simple. When I was revising, I literally did the essay cards and the cause, event, consequence sheets, and that was all that I did. What you need to do, actually that's not true, I also did practice questions. When you are revising, you need to pick something that works for you and just use it. There is absolutely no need to come up with hundreds of different methods. Just find something that works for you and go for it. So those are my revision tips for history. I hope you found them useful. Like and subscribe as always. Thanks for listening.